Okay, so we're going to do chapters 4 and 5, I think. Um, so we have chapter 4 is called Rumors and it's set in September 2024. Emmanuel is the next to be interrogated. I got down, he chuckles. Listen, if someone else is buying, I am going to have myself a drink. And we had an hour or so up on the rooftop bar before we moved to the restaurant. I sat myself out on the deck next to the rich guy from California, and I did not pay for a drink all night. How much did you drink exactly, sir? Charles has a mock politeness in his tone that somehow sounds like a cursing. Emmanuel is grinning. I lost count after the first 8 Sazeracs. That hot tin make him good and strong too. Then we all had champagne with dinner, and a man died from drinking it. It cannot have been the champagne that killed him. It's impossible. Think about it. The glasses were filled at random. We all grabbed one each and downed it. Less than half a flute per person quaffed in a toast. He was poisoned in the food, you mark my words. Charles reviews his notes. But the other witnesses say that this man had just a few canapes from those gigantic silver platters they use here, which you all shared, and the glass of champagne, and then excused himself to his room as he was so tired from his flight. He ate some potato chips, some bruschetta, a tiny muffaletta, a mini fruit tart, a beignet, a praline, and a slice of king cake, as far as we can piece together. I'm ordering tests, of course, but it seems that all the food and drink he ingested was communal, and it was just luck which items he grabbed. The only thing that could have been tampered with that was for him alone was his glass of champagne. And we all sat and ate dinner there without him, the rest of us, once he had retired early for the night. Emmanuel is looking incredibly confused. Charles inwardly groans as he realizes that this particular witness will not be much help. Unless, of course, he is a very clever killer pretending he was drunk and forgetful. Could he be lying, covering his tracks? You don't remember, sir? I must have been really wasted. Just go and have a good think about what you did that night, sir, and let me know, Charles says with ice in his voice. Each of you is still a murder suspect. Questioning the rest of the staff who were working at the hotel that night, Charles is putting together the rest of what Emmanuel claims he cannot remember. Apparently that night, Emmanuel had gotten himself so stinking drunk that the bartender had to threaten to cut him off. If you go outside there on St. Charles and get into a fight, or you drive drunk, I could be the one going to jail if I serve you any more, the bartender had told Emmanuel around midnight. Just simmer down. You've had enough alcohol. Enjoy some of our delicious food, sir, and have a few glasses of ice water. He did pause the drinking when the bartender advised it. Some part of Emmanuel's brain had remained sober enough to not want to get thrown out of the party early. He recognized that he needed to remain in control to be able to drive home when the party eventually came to an end. The less attention on him, the better. He drives too fast, but his youthful reflexes have so far allowed him to get away with it. And so during the party, Emmanuel had left the hotel for a while and walked the block it took to get to Brothers. He had fried chicken there and came back to the rooftop bar of the hotel. And this was at what time? Charles is asking him. I have no idea. They don't close, do they? They're 24-hour and they're always cooking in there. Charles takes over a number of rooms and the rooftop bar to carry out his investigation. He's trying to puzzle out who was where at what time on the night when it all happened. He strides around the empty bar, taking photos on his phone and speaking notes into it. Eventually, he interviews me. Your name is Ophelia Tanner, and you are a British national living in New Orleans for the past 4 years. Yes, sir. I've known Miss Julie for all that time, but I had not met her brother until that night. I mean, the guy who said he was her brother. You think Miss Julie needs money bad enough to kill for it? Charles asks me, staring into my eyes. while somehow simultaneously writing notes. I shudder. Absolutely not. She's a good person. I can't believe you would think that. When he lets me go, I ask Miss Julie how she's holding up under the police investigation into the death of her long-lost brother. Or rather, not her brother. She is upset, mostly I think because they spent so many years estranged. She had thought they were going to be reunited in their old age after spending most of their lives apart, but instead, this stranger had appeared, and there was no news from the real Roosevelt. I'm glad to have Miss Julie as a friend, out here in this tropical place so different from everything I know. She keeps herself informed. She is braver than me in that regard. Don't you think history could repeat itself? I ask Miss Julie, as we watch television in the hotel lobby, waiting for Charles to call each of us in for questioning. She considers, I don't think it ever does, which is unfortunate if you think about it. If history repeated itself exactly how it was before, then we could predict what was going to happen and change it, control it. But so many other factors and variables are changing too. There are moving parts, you know what I mean? And so by the time we think we can predict what is going to happen, happens, other stuff has impacted it hugely. What moving parts? Well, as an example, you're worried that we're going back to the fascism of World War II, right? See, one real difference I can think of off the top of my head is that we all have smartphones and social media now. We can communicate with folks all over the world, easily and cheaply. We can share photos and videos we made. Not reporters, not governments, us. Look at the Arab Spring. I was so grateful for Julie keeping abreast of current affairs where I could not. She dealt with our mutual friend Misha. Misha did at least exercise her right to vote, in that she would go to the polling station, but she would wait for her Catholic church to tell her exactly which candidate to vote for. Julie spoke to Misha gently. You are an intelligent woman. You could at least engage with some of the issues and decide for yourself. You must have some preference. There are two main parties. Which one do you think would help you the most? You were saying how you could do with a little more from your Social Security. Have either of the two main candidates said that they would increase it? But no, Misha was going to copy the sample ballots provided by the church telling her how to vote, just like her mother before her. Each set of candidates had a favourite decided in Rome, and Misha felt she must honour the one true faith. With no husband and no man in the house, I will seek the guidance of the church, Misha explained with a prim little sniff. You might do well to do the same, Miss Julie. You are a spinster the same as me. Julie could not contain her laughter. It rang out in musical peals. A spinster? Oh my, what century do you think we're living in, friend? I suppose you think I should not have bought my house without my father's permission as well. Why don't we just both join a convent as a pair of nuns and call it good? Well, there is no need to insult me. Julie tried a different tack. I do understand, I think. Having too many choices can feel a little scary, can be overwhelming, to the point where you almost decide not to try anything so it can't go wrong. Having no responsibility and taking no risks at all can seem rather tempting. But that's manipulation, the people who rush into that vacuum and offer to take control of your life. No one can, Misha, not really. Charles comes out into the hotel lobby and tells me and Miss Julie that we can go home for now. If he has more questions for us, we're to come straight back. He looks incredibly impressed with himself, drawn up to his full height, his chest puffed out, strutting around the hotel, cock of the walk. The rumours around New Orleans are by now out of control. The way everyone is telling the story, an older lady who always helped everyone else had stuck it to her selfish millionaire brother. The regular folks had shown snooty rich guys what happens when they don't share. In the telling and retelling, magical Miss Julie had transformed her brother into a mythical beast, a skinwalker or Wendigo. The legend of the Wendigo says that it is a punishment for greed. A human could find themselves morphing into a skeletal monster after incurring the wrath of the old gods, through gluttony or even cannibalism. Next, the results of the DNA test become common knowledge all over New Orleans. Once the lab had shown Charles the detective that there was an imposter, it seemed everyone knew. The whole city was discussing that whoever it was who'd been killed during the fancy dinner was not Julie's kin. Then the supernatural theories started flying around. Folks are delighted to scare each other with tales of skinwalkers. The legend says that a loved one becomes altered into a monster that looks just like the person, identical in every way, apart from glowing eyes and a creepy feeling. It's a bit like that movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You think it's your mother or your husband, but the truth is that it's not them anymore. That person who looks identical to how they used to is now some kind of demon from the fires of hell. It is said that this happens as a punishment for them committing an unforgivable crime, such as the murder of a family member. Then folks started to get themselves confused and scared for real. So her brother came from California, and she killed him for his money, and the corpse shape-shifted so it was no longer him. But if Miss Julie murdered her long-lost rich brother, then why ain't she the one who became the skinwalker? It is starting to be rumoured that this kind-hearted old lady is in fact one of the most powerful of witches, indulging in black magic. The legend of a zombie master is fun to tell round the fireside, but when fragile, elderly Miss Julie is suspected of being just such a magician, it leaves an unpleasant taste in the mouth. This is too much. She is talked about around New Orleans, and even good friends who have known her for years start to wonder whether any of this could be true. Could she have murdered her brother to inherit the family fortune, and then somehow used spell work to change the body so he could not be identified? Charles is furious. Trying to keep a lid on the details of this case seems to be impossible. Miss Julie Obey has no motive, he explains yet again at a debrief to his chief of police. The money, the chief grunts. Charles breathes out slowly, trying not to lose his temper. Seeing red has gotten him into trouble before. But sir, we have a number of witnesses. This brother stated in public that he was happy to give her money. Why would she kill him now, just after he has agreed that she will benefit? Revenge? He has kept her poor all these years. She had his address, sir. Charles is trying to explain how he is absolutely positive that Miss Julie is not the killer. If she really wanted to murder him, she could have done so at any time over the last several decades before all this scrutiny. And she would not have expected to inherit when he died. The man has a wife and kids. Her brother did not mention Julie in his will, and a sister is not the next of kin. The chief is clearly bored. Charles wrinkles his forehead and runs his hand through his hair. How could you ever become bored with a murder case? The chief continues, see if you can work with animal control to round up this mutt we've been getting reports about. I have the whole city hysterical about a wild coyote bothering folks in their backyards. Half the old folks swear it is a rougarou. Get it shot and bring me the carcass. We need a win here, Charles. Sir, I'll balance that with the murder investigation. The chief rolls his chair over to the window and is peering out of the slats in the blinds. You know that Miss Julie has inherited. Charles blinks. She has, already, in the middle of this investigation? I agreed it. The chief will not make eye contact. She has made us a very generous donation, and she has paid all the city's street maintenance and construction bills for the next financial year. That is a heck of a lot of potholes dealt with. Charles feels suddenly like a little boy, not taken seriously. Sir, I really can't recommend. The chief finally looks at him as he stands up to indicate that the conversation is over. We know she did it, Charles, and we also know that a great deal of good will come out of this windfall. New Orleans will prosper. Drop the case. Let folks believe that an old guy in his 90s had a wonderful night of partying in New Orleans and then died of natural causes. Best way to go, forget about it. Charles does not really know where he is as he forces himself to troop out of the chief's office. He feels as if he is inside a tunnel of anxiety and shame. He has had the case taken from him, but why? What in the hell is going on? When he returns to his splintery wooden desk, he sees that some joker has tacked a printout of a cartoon character to the screen of his computer. Pulling it down, he barely registers that it is Scooby-Doo. Scrawled underneath is Hound of the Baskervilles from the Sherlock Holmes story. He screws it up into a ball and ignores the stifled sniggering he can hear behind him. That was the end of chapter 4. Now we have chapter 5, which is called The Dog, and this date is October 2024. Julie had been brought up with the legend of the Rougarou, otherwise known as the Loup-garou. This is a large, wild, and dangerous dog, sometimes depicted standing on hind legs. Folks who have had an up-close and personal encounter with this thing say it roams the bayous after dark. Descriptions of it as half wolf, yet still barely human. A hairy beast in weird canine shape, the Louisiana version of a werewolf perhaps. The legend had it that the Rougarou was a cursed creature, a human transformed. There were various explanations for how the Rougarou came to be, such as a dark magic spell by a witch, even perhaps a punishment by God for eating human flesh, cannibalism not being unheard of in lean times. But mostly the idea of the beast was used to keep naughty children in line. Julie's mother would threaten her with being bitten by the Rougarou if she didn't keep the noise down or if she didn't get cleaned up in time to go to church on Sunday. Now a grown-ass woman in her 80s, Julie believed in the Rougarou even more if that were possible. Adults know that there are some things that cannot be controlled. She may reassure little kids that there are no monsters that can eat you, but is that really true? Perhaps the hatred in the heart of another person was even more destructive than an innocent kid could imagine. The forces of nature and the elements did not care whether tiny humans, with our brief reign over the earth, lived or died. But the urge to harm, kill, and destroy in a human heart, that was the real curse. It has rained in the night. Julie rises early around 5 a.m. She goes to her back porch and stands in her stockinged feet looking out. Through her glass doors, she can see that the sky is that eerie yellow colour with a bank of dark clouds that lets you know that there is dramatic weather on the way, a tropical storm or even a hurricane. The heavy wind chimes she has strung up in the trees are tinkling away, with the leaves rustling and a few large raindrops still falling. There is an inch or two of water standing all around. The roots of the shade tree are flooded. New Orleans is just below sea level, and any water that falls from the sky just sits on top of the ground. The already saturated clay cannot absorb any more. The mud-churned water of the bayous makes for a beautiful landscape, but swamp dwellers know that floods are a perennial fact of life here. It takes her a moment to see that a large dog is standing, still as a statue, on her back porch. Julie freezes. She hadn't noticed him there at all. How to describe him? A very large, lean creature with a wolf-like shape. It must be her imagination, but she could swear that just a second before he was standing up on his hind legs, nosing into the bird feeder she had on her tree. He is down on all fours now, the fast movement just detected in her peripheral vision. A fleeting memory. Perhaps it was a trick of the light and he is just a gigantic stray. He is a stone's throw away from her, but she can see even from this distance that his head would come up to her chest, and she is not a short woman. He is a greyish tan in colour with soft spikes of fur, a rangy, wild-looking dog. He looks as if he would be about a metre long if measured along his spine from shoulder to butt. And he also has very long legs, the way that coyotes and wolves do. If he were to rear up, he would be colossal and dangerous. He has a handsome face and a feral-looking, slightly undersized head. His expression looks exhausted, with his head hanging down between his shoulders, and he has that 1,000-yard stare of a dog that is stressed. Julie can see the whites of his eyes all around. He is silent and motionless, but he looks at her as if to communicate through the glass of her porch door. "Let me in," he seems to say. "I am scared of the storm." Right on cue, the wind picks up and large raindrops begin to fall. The clouds are moving fast and the sky is growing dark. Julie doesn't like to frighten him away, but there is no way on God's green earth that she's going to open the door either. Peering through the glass made murky with raindrops on the outside and the fog of her breath on the inside, she cannot see a collar or name tag. This dog might not look well groomed, but nonetheless is probably an escaped pet. Is she being cruel, she asks herself. He will survive out there, she feels certain. Animals can understand the elements better than us. She feels a certain sadness or loneliness coming from this dog. "I'm sorry, boy," she says in her mind, through the glass. "I cannot let you into this house because I do not know if you will kill me." Julie thinks of all the times that she has been scared of a dog. When she was but 4 years old, she had tried to walk through a parched field next to a farm. The watchdogs had been left loose and they had run at her. 2 savage, slavering pit bulls, brutalized by the owner until they were ready to kill. To this day, she did not know how she lived. That must have been God. She had run for her life, and perhaps by divine intervention, the dogs had been distracted. Terror and youth had made her somehow outrun them, or maybe she had imagined how close they were. All she knew was that she had run home and they had not killed her. She had not died that day. When she told her mother about what had happened, Julie had gotten a spanking for going off by herself. She was in trouble for roaming around without the protection of her older brothers and sisters, and for running through the wrong field. Her mother had begun to terrorize little Julie with stories of adults as well as children who had been mauled by guard dogs. "Dogs are used to keep us in line," her mother had explained. Julie's big brother Roosevelt had then regaled her with stories of lynchings and dog attacks that had been used as a weapon. Julie, therefore, was afraid of dogs. As she had grown up, she could see that pet dogs were very loved, but she never lost her mistrust of canines in any form. In one of the homes where she was taking care of an elderly gentleman, his son would bring around a sweet Labrador cross, a year old, as big as he would ever be, and yet still moving like a puppy. Huge feet. Julie could see the love in his eyes. Some parts of her knew that he would not hurt her and that this was a very good dog, but nothing could remove the layers of fear already instilled. She knew she would never have a dog herself and that she would always give them a wide berth. So this cool and rainy morning, she peeks again out of her back porch through the glass and can see that the dog is still standing there waiting patiently, as if he expects to let him inside. "Shoo," she calls out to him. She taps on the glass. He makes a move as if to spring towards her, and she jumps back even though he cannot get in. Suddenly he runs away as the lightning starts on the horizon. Julie presses her forehead against the panes to see where he went. That Detective Charles is approaching, getting drenched by the downpour and picking his way through the long wet grass. He wears a cream-coloured linen suit, and the ends of the fabric are getting filthy, dragging through the mud. He has fussy little pointed moccasins on, and he walks carefully, lifting his foot high with each step, trying in vain to keep his immaculate clothing clean in her wild garden. Oh Lord, what does he want now? "Miss Julie, a few minutes more of your time, if you'd be so kind." She opens the door a crack. Don't you need a warrant to be coming around here bothering people? I already told you everything I know. No need for a warrant, Mum. Let's just sit down and have a cup of coffee. Inviting yourself into my house? You bet. Well, I don't drink coffee. It's sweet tea or nothing. He does come in, and she steers him resentfully to her large wooden dining table. Charles sits himself down at the head of her table and begins serving himself from the chilled carafe without being asked. He drinks deeply from an icy glass Julie had just gotten out of the refrigerator for herself. She had not expected any visitors today and had been looking forward to a day of peaceful solitude. She has to resist the urge to smack Charles upside the head. Charles hopes that Julie doesn't speak to the chief of police again soon and find out that he has actually been instructed to drop the case. Charles intends to press on with his investigation for as long as he can get away with it. It bothers him not to know the truth. He figures that when he triumphs and arrests the real killer, the chief will be happy enough about it to grudgingly forgive Charles for bending the rules. It doesn't make sense to me why your brother would come back here to New Orleans after all this time, Charles begins. Well, he didn't, she reminds him. This confidence trickster somehow intercepted my letters. I don't know where my brother is or whether he is safe. And I don't know who this other man was, or why he lied to me and scammed me, saying he was my kin when he was nothing of the sort. I know that, but please tell me everything you remember. Any tiny detail might bring justice. Isn't that what we both want? Charles helps himself from the jug with the ice cubes and floating lemon slices. Julie looks away from him to try to lower her rage levels. Charles launches into his questions to corroborate what he has already learned from reviewing records. Both you and your brother Roosevelt were born and raised here? We were, Julie confirms. And my mother and grandmother did a good job, with 8 of us little ones. Roosevelt was the oldest. He was handsome, and he got his break at the movie studios here. Over time, he got offered work in LA, and he moved out there while I was still at school. Charles is writing all this in his notepad while still staring directly into Miss Julie's eyes. She is just about the only one of the murder suspects who is not at all intimidated by him and his crafty methods. So your oldest brother moved out of the family home and went to LA? Not at first. We were living in a very small house, you see. 8 of us, my mother and her mother. There just wasn't space for everyone. My mother kept on having more children. She said she was blessed each time. She said she had been blessed with another baby. And then each of us blessings kept on growing bigger. Roosevelt got a little place with his new wife and their children. Where? Here, further down the same street. And he brought our grandma to live with him when she was getting old and sick. She had always helped my mother with all of us children, but there came a time when my mother's mother just needed to rest. I'll need both addresses. Of course. Then after my grandmother died, Roosevelt took his wife and kids to live in LA. He sent a little money back home to my mother until she died. But after that, we all heard he had been given the proceeds from our farm when it was sold. Plus he had gotten plenty of solid acting work over the years, and he was rich now. So when did you finally hear from him? You said you lost touch once he was living so far away. I showed you his letter already, Miss Julie says sharply. She hates all the time they're wasting, and she hates Charles prying into her private family business. Roosevelt said he was getting on in years and he wanted to make amends. He had a fortune and he finally realized that he should be sharing with me. Charles already has his hand on the pitcher to fill his mug again. He asks her in between swallows, when did you realize the man who came to the party was not your brother? I told you I did not. I thought he was my blood. I had not laid eyes upon him in 60 years. So you thought he was your brother? I've been telling you that. He said he was, and I had no reason to doubt it. Why would he pretend? You think there was some way he could get the money through fraud? Well, whatever the reason that this man was posing as your family, he has died. We have yet to trace who he actually was. So you're no closer to finding out who that was, Miss Julie scoffs. And you're telling me my brother I was just grieving is still alive? We're in the process of contacting your real brother, Mom. Charles lied. He had no idea where the real brother was. Please let us know right away if you hear from him. Julie can't believe what she's hearing. This man, whoever was impersonating my big brother, who I knew so well when I was growing up, he knew all Roosevelt's little ways, his mannerisms. And also, who wrote the letter to me, agreeing for him to come here and give me a proper share of our family money? We're working on the assumption that it was not your brother, Charles explains, that the letter was from someone else involved in this deception or fraud, call it what you will. Damn, I don't like that. Neither do I, ma'am. Charles wants to triangulate the bank records he has seen. Your late father did not live at home with you and your mother. He did not. He was travelling for work, Mother would say, and she would cry about it. He would visit us and give us all a good belting. I would hide in the fields till he had gone. And he left an inheritance when he died? The farm. It was sold, and Daddy's will said that Roosevelt was to get it all. All the rest of us, his 7 other children, Daddy did not provide for. Julie takes the jug away from Charles before he gets ideas about a third mugful. She fills her own little glass and takes the pitcher back to the fridge. Was there anything else, or will you be on your way now? She asks him pointedly. Her mind is spinning. Until the results of the DNA had been received, she had been grieving her brother Roosevelt, and now it seems that he was not the man who died after all. Where was her brother then? Was he dead? Had he known about this scammer? She has called her brother's phone number over and over but got no reply. She wants to try calling him again, but not while this idiot is in her house. Charles thinks about the interrogation techniques he had been taught at police training. At this point, Julie is the prime suspect in the murder of a man whose death meant she has inherited a fortune. But under a barrage of questions, most suspects would not be able to recall the useful evidence he needed. Charles wonders why the real brother was now proving so difficult to locate if he had not actually been the one killed. Police cooperation between the states is usually pretty good, but the block on the case by the big bosses meant that Charles cannot fly to California himself and properly check things out. He is itching to go to Julie's brother's house. Charles wants to see with his own eyes whether Roosevelt is there and interview the wife and kids, but he is not allowed to do any of that. Charles enjoys house-to-house police work, making inquiries. He finds people endlessly fascinating, though he does not trust anyone. Julie is glaring at him as if she would like to hit him with a frying pan. I don't know what else you want me to tell you, she is saying, barely troubling to keep the rising frustration out of her voice. Charles changes tack. Tell me about your brother, your real brother. What was he like when you were kids? She considers. He was the oldest, I was the youngest. When I was born, he was already 12 years old. In those days, that meant he had a lot of responsibilities on the farm. He would be up before the dawn and he would go to school right after his chores and then come back to more farm work. If we could get free time to hang out, he would want to take a nap. I thought he was boring, but now I realize I was the spoiled baby of the family. I had to do some chores, but everyone made excuses for me as I was the youngest. If Charles feels any frustration, he does not show it. He smiles. He knows that torture does not work. Some of the young gung-ho cops he saw come through the training enjoyed putting on pressure. They thought the bad guy would crack and tell them everything he knew. But Charles had better instincts than that. He knew that such confessions are usually wrong. It does more harm to an investigation to get evidence you could not rely on. Honey traps work, manipulation works. Get the bad guy to feel safe and happy, and he will accidentally tell you everything he knows. But Charles knew that the bad guy is often mistrustful like himself. Not every villain has a tragic backstory filled with trauma, but some do. The common denominator seemed to be survival instincts. The chief of police tells me you have now inherited your brother's fortune, Charles says casually, looking down into his now empty glass. How can that be when we have no proof that your brother is dead and you were not named in his will? Julie forces herself to remain calm and not react to this insolence. It would not do at all to give this upstart of a cop any reason to think she was a murderer. That was the kindness of my brother's wife and children, detective, she tells him sweetly. Now, I never got to meet my sister-in-law, but she gave me a brief phone call. When was this? A day or two before this man claiming to be Roosevelt arrived in New Orleans. His wife phoned me to say that she wanted to ensure I got all the money, was how she put it. I was confused since I thought she would want to keep plenty for herself and her kids, but I guess she must have felt they were well enough provided for already. I remember hearing that their fancy house in LA was paid off, no mortgage. Charles is doing his usual party trick of scribbling notes without taking his eyes off Julie's face. So presumably she thought your brother was alive at that point. Julie is distracted. The enormous sail-like leaves of the banana palm in her backyard have begun waving and trembling. Is that dog out there again? Please, could you get animal control to pick him up? Oh, Lord, Charles groans. The chief wants me to deal with this mutt. They go to the back window and they peer out. They can just about make out the coyote-looking hound at the very end of the backyard, slinking along the fence, trying to get shelter from the rain. Has he been bothering you? Charles is trying to take a photo on his phone, zooming in on the grey creature that is disappearing into the shadows. Well, yes, I guess he is bothering me and other folks too, Julie says. He looks rather savage, wouldn't you say? And I would like to be able to leave my own house. So that's the end of chapter 5. I think I'll have to do chapter 6 in the morning now. But do come back. What's going to happen?